The CBS Radio Workshop, dedicated to man's imagination, the theater of the mind. Tonight, we present the mythical saga of a modern seer, a true tycoon of facts and figures, a molder as well as encyclopedist of public opinion, a man who, for more than a generation, had reason to pride himself in knowing what people thought and wanted, even before they actually thought or wanted it. A man whose every news release has been awaited with eager interest by paupers and presidents. A man whose pronouncements have often helped to shape national policy, crystallize business trends, and change the thinking habits of our people. A man, however, who one day accepted an assignment from the Lord of the Nether Regions and proved only fallible after all. The title, The Billion-Dollar Failure of Figure Fallup. Our story centers in one of the many tall, teeming buildings which seem to reach for the sky from each side of New York's Madison Avenue. The building is one of those which house some of the world's most influential advertising and public relations offices. Those business concerns which so effectively persuade so many millions of us to change from white toothpaste to yellow, from yellow to green, and then again back to white. Firms which maintain headquarters in this building have made America filter-tip conscious, lured children into eating nourishing foods, and helped to convince women that they would be out of style if they didn't either raise or lower their hemlines each year. The accounts of some of these firms run into tens of millions of dollars. There is one whole floor in our particular building, however, which is occupied by an organization devoted to an entirely different form of enterprise. It neither sells nor promotes the sale of goods and ideas, except perhaps its own services. Instead, it explores the public mind and registers and tabulates its reactions to the merchandise of its clients, whether tangible or intangible. Figure Fallup's factual factotums. As our story begins, Mr. Argus Goody, the vice president in charge of operations and executive secretary of Figure Fallup's factual factotums, is entering the busy lobby of our building.
Paper. Tough presidential campaign predict.
Hello, Joe. Got my papers?
Sure, Mr. Goody. News, racing force.
Shh. You wouldn't say that so loud, Joe. There might be potential clients around. They don't always understand.
Sure, Mr. Goody. I'm sorry.
Morning, Mr. Goody.
Third floor, please.
Yes, I know.
Oh, no, it's an outrage.
Sir?
Swaps at Santa Anita. You know what? They're paying 1 to 5.
Yes, sir. Third floor, Mr. Goody.
It's a disgrace. Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Morning, Shekel.
Good morning, Mr. Goody.
Well, Shekel, what do we got?
Well, there have been a bunch of calls.
Well, that reminds me. As soon as we're through, call Casper for me. Find out if he can't get me better than 1 to 5 on swaps this afternoon or Santa Anita. Tell him I'll put 100 on him, but at better odds.
Yes, sir. Swaps 1 to 5, 100, Hialeah. There was a call from Pretty Skin Soap. Could we do a survey for them that would show...
That can wait. We got too many soap surveys now anyway. What else?
Glowworm lipstick.
Let it wait.
Well, there were half dozen more like that in the mail, and I guess they can wait, too. Oh, somebody from the Republican committee called from San Francisco. Could we find out how Mr. Nixon stands in Wyoming?
Oh, well, we might have to do something about that. They have some money. Call them back, Shekel, and tell them we'll take the job in principle, but they should wire us exactly what they want, and we'll wire them our acceptance and price. We better have something in writing.
Call committee, accept in principle. Wire requirements, will confirm, quote, price. Well, I guess that's most of it, Mr. Goody. Have you heard from Mr. Fallup yet?
There you word. The old boy must be really living it up, wherever he is.
I'm really looking forward to meeting him someday. You know, Mr. Goody, I have been here for nearly 2 years now, and I've never even seen Mr. Fallup.
Neither have I. But we're in constant touch by phone.
Oh, I forgot. There's somebody waiting for you in Mr. Fallup's office.
Look, Shekel, I've told you time and time again I don't want to see people unless I know who they are and unless they have an appointment.
Oh, but he's a doll. Just a doll. Seriously, Mr. Goody, I don't think this is the sort of man even you would want me to turn away before you can talk to him. I told him you never saw anybody without an appointment, and then he said something about millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars?
Well, yes, Mr. Goody, that kind of talk is kind of persuasive.
Did he look like a nut or something?
Oh, no, Mr. Goody, I tell you, he looks like a real doll. Smooth, if you know what I mean. And kind of important looking.
Well, I guess I better see him. Shekel, what's this joker's name?
Oh, he wouldn't say.
Oh, one of those. How do you do, sir?
How do you do, Mr. Goody? That is correct, isn't it?
Goody it is, Mr. Sit down. I'm afraid I haven't had the pleasure.
I suppose you mean my name. I didn't think I should explain to your secretary because, well, you see, it is a bit out of the ordinary and it does require an explanation. Actually, if I may say so, I called to see Mr. Fallup, but I'm told he's away.
Yeah, he's been away quite a while. We're in constant touch, though.
Yes, so your secretary, a most efficient young woman, has told me. So I decided to wait for you concerning a matter that is most important to me. Oh, my name, yes. Well, I prefer Lucifer, Mr. Goody. Just Lucifer. It was my original name, you see.
Lucifer, huh?
I have been called many other things, of course. Satan has been a very popular number. The Arabs make it Shaitan, 2 dots on the I. I've also been called Asmodeus, Asmarotti, Beelzebub, Samael, the Old Nick, Old Clotey, and several hundred other names in many languages.
The devil, huh?
Yes, Mr. Goody. That is another name people often apply to me, but I still prefer Lucifer.
Okay, Mr. Lucifer. Maybe we better put it on the line. Now, what can this firm do for you? This organization, I should have said, since we have branches and correspondents all over the world.
Yes, I know. That's why I came to you. You've been most highly recommended to me by one of the inmates of my establishment, whom I happen to be on a rather friendly personal basis. He was once in charge of a rather major project, I believe. A nationwide survey as to the number of men and women who prefer to wear only the tops or the bottoms of their pajamas when going to bed.
Oh, Charlie Faxwell. Yeah, I heard he passed on.
You may be happy to hear that Mr. Faxwell is now one of my most valued assistants.
Oh, what do you know? Good old Charlie. I always knew he'd make good someday.
Yes. Well, Mr. Faxwell told me something about these new methods of ascertaining what human beings think and believe and what they're likely to do.
Yes, those we've got, Mr. Lucifer. Why, our organization predicted within 6% what Monaco would think of getting a new heir.
Yes, that's all.
However, I frankly don't quite see in what way we can be of service to you, Mr. Lucifer.
Well, it is a little complicated, I admit. Generally speaking, though, my problem could be described like this. And I shall depend on your advice for any additional findings. You see, Mr. Goody, during most of the thousands of years during which I have been in my unwanted position, due to a mistake I once made, my duties have really not been too arduous. A predictable, slowly increasing number of children were born upon this planet each year. Of those who lived into adulthood, a certain fairly predictable percentage went astray, and thus became my charges.
Uh-huh.
But ever since your species has acquired a certain mastery over the physical forces, ever since you have acquired knowledge which perhaps you weren't ready for, in other words, ever since you've become civilized, as you call it, my establishment has been a madhouse. Why, in some years, millions upon millions of souls stream past me, and I don't have adequate facilities for them, nor an adequate staff to deal with them. In general, I seem to be in for a hectic time. And when I mentioned my problems to Mr. Faxwell, he told me about your polls, which had been so useful to him, and he suggested that I see Mr. Fallup. I suppose we down below should not neglect modern aids such as yours.
Excuse me, Mr. Lucifer. I don't know which one of us belongs in the bug house, you or me. But I'll play along with you for a little while longer. Now, I ask you again, just what did you have in mind?
In mind? Well, it's quite simple, isn't it? I would like you to make a survey or a poll, or whatever you call it, which will tell me with reasonable accuracy how many new arrivals to expect during each of, say, the next 20 or 30 years, so that I can plan my expansion program accordingly.
Look, Mr. Lucifer, that would involve the whole world, wouldn't it?
Of course, sir.
And just how would you expect us to get you this information?
I don't know, Mr. Goody. That's why I came to consult your organization. I understood from the late Mr. Faxwell that practically any question is now subjected to the test of a survey, and that your methods have been perfected to such an extent that you're capable of handling any of the normal difficulties you may encounter.
Well, look, Mr. Lucifer, just suppose that we agreed to undertake a survey. How would you expect us to go about it?
I'm sure I can't give you any advice, Mr. Goody. That, I presume, to be your business. But I take it for granted that you and your staff know the difference between right and wrong, between good and evil, and that you have statistics covering the life expectancies of average human beings in your office, or could obtain them, perhaps, and that by examining the behavior of a large number of individuals in various countries, deciding what percentage is evil, and then comparing your figures with your statistics on life expectancy, you might be able to give me a fairly accurate estimate as to the number of annual arrivals I have to prepare for. Oh, my. Believe me, Mr. Goody, I haven't held so long a speech or used so many long words since, well, it must be in the Old Testament somewhere.
Mr. Lucifer, do you have any idea how many people such a job would take if it's supposed to cover the whole world, and how much it would cost?
As to the number of people you'd need, I'm no expert, of course. A good many thousands, I should think. As to money, well, Mr. Goody, I'm quite prepared to believe that a project of the magnitude I have in mind might cost up to, say, $1 billion.
Excuse me, Mr. Lucifer. I mean, would you mind repeating that?
Why, I merely mentioned that I would not be unprepared to pay $1 billion for a survey of such scope.
A billion?
Why, yes, more or less. I hold a great deal of the currencies of various nationalities, you understand. Money which I was obliged to collect from new arrivals during all this time. Since you'll have to operate all over the world, I thought we might utilize some of this currency for the necessary expenses. I also have a fair store of gold coins, and I thought that some of those perhaps might be useful in countries for which I have insufficient paper currency on hand.
You know that gold is illegal.
Not to receive it, I believe, only to keep it. But perhaps you can find a profitable way to part with it.
Okay, Lucifer, you got a deal. How do we make out the contract?
Contract? Oh, you know, Mr. Goody, the only contracts I ever sign are signed with the blood of the other party. And I only do that because some writers of stories about me insist that that is my method. No, we don't need a contract. What I had planned was to make an initial installment of, say, $100 million to you. $90 million, as I thought of it, in various governmental and banknotes, and perhaps $10 million in gold for emergencies. That should be enough to enable you to start building an organization. Then, whenever you need more, you can just call on me, and if I should prove remiss, you can, of course, drop the whole project. Oh, I had thought, by the way, that about 15% of your total expenses would be a reasonable, clear profit for your firm.
15%? That would be $150 million.
Something like that. And I'm prepared to throw in a few $100,000 for any official or member of the survey staff who distinguishes him or herself. Does that sound reasonable?
Mister, you are nuts after all. On what bank are you going to give me a check for?
I was not proposing to give you any check, Mr. Goody. Just the cash and the gold.
You mean out of that little satchel? Well, that's hardly bigger than a woman's handbag.
Nevertheless, here's your money. Italian, 50,000. Burmese, 40. Brazil, 70,000. Argentina, China, Australia, Austria, Yugoslavia. Siam, Nepal, Formosa. Well, that's the lot, I guess. Count it if you wish.
I wouldn't know how to start. I can't even read the writing on most of these things. They look like money, all right, though.
There you are, sir. Now for the gold. About 10 tons of it, I believe.
10 tons? Out of that little satchel of yours?
Every $1 million is a ton. Here we go.
Hey, wait a minute.
And now, goodbye, Mr. Goody. I shall expect a report from you. And my regrets to Mr. Fallup at having been unable to make his acquaintance as well. Oh, no, thank you. I shall find my way out.
Gold, it's real gold. 10 whole millions. Hey, Shekel, come here a minute.
What a mess.
Money, Shekel. We got the biggest job that's ever been done, Shekel. Look at it. $100 million. And this is only the beginning.
Call from Moscow, sir.
What's the matter? Did Khrushchev get tight again? Give it to Mr. Ashburn.
Cable from Hong Kong, sir.
439, repeat 439, residents jailed for theft and burglary, week ending today. 2321, repeat 2321, women and girls arrested for immorality. List of name follows airmail. Thanks. Give it to Mr. Ross over there, will you?
Call from Tokyo, Mr. Goody.
Give him to Mr. Askelman at that third desk there. He handles Scandinavia.
Mr. Haskell from Ohio is here, Mr.
Oh,
Goody.
yeah, show him in. Sorry, Haskell, I didn't realize you'd come right along.
I just wanted to report on that bank deal you asked about, Mr. Goody. It seemed a little too complicated for a letter.
What gives?
Well, nothing strictly illegal, but it sure wasn't strictly legal either.
I see. Good work, Haskell. Good work. Look, do me a favor. Will you tell him Mr. Brubaker over there? He'll take notes on the whole thing. Yeah, this is Goody. Okay, shoot. Yeah? Survey of 525 London women indicates adultery up 31% nationally in the last 10 years. Yeah, I got it. Thanks, Bill. Hey, Shekel.
Yes, sir.
I think we're really getting there. You know that idea of mine about borrowing a flock of Mr. Lucifer's girls? Well, that was a doggone near stroke of genius, if I do say it myself. What they did to Boston and Mason City.
Yes, I know. And to a lot of other places, too.
What's the matter, Shek? You ought to be happy. Don't you want us to make a good record?
Well, sure, Mr. Goody, but...
Stop being silly, Shek. When a client gives you a job, he wants results. If he sells soap, he wants you to prove to him that people like his soap better than any other kind. If he runs a camp for kids or old folks, he wants you to find as many kids and old folks who can afford to go there as you can find. So what's the difference if we help some people along where they're going anyway?
Mr. Goody, there's a gentleman to see you. He's waiting in Mr. Fallup's private office.
Well, who let him in?
I did, sir. He's our client.
Our client? You mean Mr. Lucifer?
Yes, sir.
Well, come on, Shaq. Let's give the big boy the word. Hello, Mr. Lucifer. Nice seeing you again.
How do you do? How do you do, Miss Shekel? And you, Mr. Goody?
You've read our preliminary reports, I guess.
I have, and I've been somewhat saddened.
Oh, well, I can understand that since you've only seen the preliminaries. But I've just begun dictating the summary of our final report, and this will really make your eyes pop. We're going to wind up with only 2 holdouts. A character down in Central Africa somewhere and some preacher somewhere in Australia. Those girls of yours were a big help, Mr. Lucifer.
Yes, I see. I wonder if we did not misunderstand each other, Mr. Goody. Or shouldn't I call you by your right name, Mr. Fallup?
Huh? How did you know?
Well, the devil's supposed to know something, isn't he? I mean, I do have some sources of information of my own.
Do you know about this too, Shekel?
Well, not at first, of course, but I did figure it out after a while.
You see, Mr. Fallup, I suppose we might as well say now that deceptions are all very well, perhaps, but take these reports, for example.
What's the matter with them? Aren't they what you wanted?
Now, let's see. Mr. O.B. Smith, bank president of so-and-so forth, Ohio, last year participated in an arrangement whereby a school foundation cost the city considerably in excess of actual valuation. Mr. Smith is estimated to have illegally profited to the extent of at least $10,000 from this transaction.
Well?
Well, Did you trouble to find out that this same Mr. Smith has built at least one badly needed playground for children and has endowed several boys' clubs and Boy Scout troops? Why, it must have cost him several times as much as he could possibly have gained from this construction job, about which, as your reporter himself admits, there was actually nothing illegal, even though there were some shady aspects involved, perhaps.
Well, what's that got to do with it?
Well, now let us assume, Mr. Fallup, that you were one of the judges chosen to preside at the trial which all of your species must face someday. Would you condemn this man?
Well, there was something fishy about that deal.
There may have been, Mr. Fallup. But with a man whose entire life has otherwise tended toward the good, is that sufficient reason to condemn him altogether? Now, Miss Farwell of et cetera, is reported to have spent a week in Miami with a man not her husband. Did you actually know what, if anything, happened, Mr. Fallup?
Well, I don't have any eyewitness account.
I'm sure you don't, Mr. Fallup. I don't suppose it struck you as important either that Miss Farwell has spent her entire life taking care of a hopelessly paralyzed mother and two younger sisters.
Yes, but what's the...
Those things count, Mr. Fallup, when the final balance is struck. There is one thing, Mr. Fallup, that seems to characterize all this bosh. You apparently have never heard of qualities such as grace, penance, indulgence, and all the other saving factors which make human existence tolerable and sometimes even beautiful in an odd sort of way.
I thought you wanted us to...
So I did, Mr. Fallup, but I wanted to find out, not deal with loaded dice. Oh, yes, I'm sure that you use the 10 Commandments and the list of the 7 deadly sins as a guide, but didn't you try to tempt your subjects to violate those rules?
Well,
Those young ladies you asked me to send you.
Well, you did want a good report, didn't you?
A good one, yes, but a factual one. I fail to understand that you could think I would be so foolish as to want more, let us say, work than absolutely necessary.
Miss Shekel, telephone from Rome. They say it's urgent.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Lucifer.
Well, I'll be going, Mr. Fallup. I suppose I shall just have to go back to things as they've always been, to wait and see from year to year who will be assigned to my charge. It may be slightly uncomfortable and unsystematic, but at the moment I'm inclined to suspect that it has certain advantages over your modern methods. You see, Mr. Fallup, I'm still committed to the old-fashioned idea that human beings are totalities with a spirit and integrity of their own. They may make certain mistakes, of course, but it seems to me that even those always have to be considered in the frame of the overall picture, something your modern methods do not take into account.
Mr. Goody, may I see you a minute?
I'm sorry, Mr. Lucifer. I'll be right back.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Oh, I'm too confused to follow your different names around. There was a call from Rome.
Yes?
The money. Our office there says it's no good. They say the government that put it out went out of business 100 years ago.
What?
And that isn't all. Mr. Brubaker tells me that Belgrade called him, too, and said there hasn't been any Kingdom of Serbia since the First World War.
Why, that... Mr. Lucifer, would you come here a minute?
Certainly, Mr. Fallup.
How would you like you to step into the storage room with me a minute? About this money. Let me see. Here's a pretty one. Sardinia, 1843. I always thought Sardinia was part of Italy.
Well, so it is.
So what good is this money? It's all 40, 50, 100 years old. Most of these governments don't even exist anymore.
Oh, my oversight, Mr. Fallup. Time doesn't mean as much to us as it does to you, I suppose. I naturally paid you in the currencies I have accumulated from my guests over the years, and I must admit the time element never occurred to me. At that, I suppose my money is as valid as your reports to me were.
Never occurred to you. Fine.
Well, your governments do change rather frequently.
Yeah, but all my money's tied up in this job. Every penny of it. and a lot from the bank.
Well, Mr. Fallup, this is something I had not planned on. Oh, what about the gold?
Oh, I'd forgotten about that. If it is gold.
It's gold, I should think. Unless the people from whom I obtained it were even worse rascals than I thought.
This stuff is all old, too. I couldn't do anything with it.
I would suggest that you turn it over to your government. Even if the coinage is old, the gold content should realize something.
Me stuck with all those expenses.
Oh, well, it may seem to you to be a bit out of character for me, but if you should incur any actual losses, I shall make them up for you. But no more. Well, I'll be in touch with you, Mr. Fallup. And, do read a book sometime, will you? So many mistakes can be avoided if one has a certain amount of knowledge and understanding.
Make up my expenses. Me with $1 billion as good as made. Oh, well, back to work, I guess. No more morals for me.
Hi. So what gives?
Just no dough, that's all.
None at all?
Well, he says he'll make up our expenses.
Well, it might be just as well at that. A man from the Treasury and an FBI guy were here, asking about some big money they heard we got and hadn't reported.
Tell him to forget it. The stuff's no good.
I'll call him. Oh, by the way, Eisenhower and Nixon got nominated again.
Yeah, so I hear. We were right on that one anyway.
Yes, but the National Committee called up. Would we pull Arkansas and Vermont for Nixon?
Tell him no. I don't want any more of that kind of stuff.
And the Barbers Union called. They want to know, will we make a survey, how women like to be kissed by men with beards, seeing as how beards are coming back and all.
Yeah. I guess that's more our speed, Shaq. Sure, tell him sure.
I'll call him, boss. And, oh, yes, there's one more thing. There's a man waiting for you in the private office.
Oh, no, Shekel, no. I told you not to...
Oh, but he's a doll. I just couldn't say no.
All right, I'll see him. How do you do, sir? I'm Mr. Goody, the executive vice president. What can I do for you?
How do you do, Mr. Goody? I've been told by, well, actually a competitor, I suppose, that you've been conducting some valuable studies regarding human behavior.
Well, I don't know.
It was Mr. Lucifer, in fact, if you recall the name.
Oh, yeah, I recall. May I ask?
My name is Gabriel, Mr. Goody. I come from heaven.
Heaven? Oh, no.
You've been listening to the CBS Radio Workshop and The $1 Billion Failure of Figure Fallup, written by Henry E. Fritsch, with Joseph Julian as Mr. Goody, Bob Dryden as Lucifer, and Elaine Rost as Miss Shekel. The CBS Radio Workshop is produced and directed in New York by Paul Roberts. This is Bob Hite inviting you to join us again next week when, from Hollywood, we present Colloquy Number 3, a study of satire, with Stan Freberg, a historical examination of satirical literature from Voltaire to the moderns. Stay tuned for 5 minutes of CBS News, to be followed over most of these same stations by My Son Jeep. America listens most to the CBS Radio Network.